Okie dokie, Loki. I know I've not really uploaded a video for quite some time, but I put it off long enough, and I figure I'm gonna do. I might try to finish Princess Celestia up. No guarantees though, cause the next chapter after this one has like 4,000 some. It's a lot. So, however, when we last left off, Piggy Pie was upset. Shit was on fire and yada yada. So I'm going to finish up chapter 4 here in this video, and hopefully that'll be good. But I'll upload more after that. Gently, please! Rarity gasped, her restraints tightening. Oh, what's that? Harder, you say? My pleasure, Celestia said, whipping Rarity's rear with the towel again. Rarity was tied up, her own ribbons being used as rope while she stayed sprawled out in an embarrassing pose. She was bent over with her back legs on the floor. Her rump stuck out and upwards higher than normal, while her front legs were pulled behind her back and up into the air, the ribbons holding them attached to the ceiling. Her rump was not bleeding, but was covered with several streaks of red marks left from the constant whipping caused by Rarity's best and most authentic luxury towel. Celestia was in front of her, her hooves draped over her shoulders and down her back to the sides of her flank, while she occasionally dipped her head down for a few light licks, and maybe even a suck of Rarity's horn. Her horn was glowing with magic that was being used on the towel, which would whip Rarity's rear again on command. Occasionally, Celestia's tentacle-like hair would slither down her sides and begin stroking itself along her chest and stomach. Then, glide way down in between her haunches and lightly apply pressure while making tight swirls against her coat. After that, they would gently glide up her body again while stroking against her neck and cheeks before returning back down to repeat the motion again. Rarity squirmed and grunted loudly, very unladylike. The feeling of her flank tingling with pain, yet the sensation from her horn broadcasting waves of pleasure across her body. She tried her best to resist, but it did not take long for the first moan to escape from her lips. The feeling of pain and pleasure combining in her body made her mind scramble, unable to process anything except the sensations forcing their way through it. She moaned again as Celestia began to suck on her horn once more. Magic lightly began seeping from her horn, Rarity quickly losing control of even her most basic functions. Her legs also began to shake. First her rear legs, and then her front, quivering while in midair while her body was sweating profusely. The towel whipped her again, and instead of a pain-induced grunt, she moaned once more, unable to differentiate pain from being anything other than pleasure anymore. It was as if the actions most negative towards her were now turning into some of the most exciting things ever. Her legs forced apart and into one place, though discomforting at first, seemed to provide a clean passage for her body to feel the full force of the satisfying waves passing through her. Her rear, which though being whipped roughly, provided a sort of counterbalance in the first part of the devious connection now reacting inside her. The feeling of her horn brought the second, adding the most thrilling and wonderful feeling she had ever faced with, and pushing it through her body. When they met in the center, her inside seemed to explode with an uncontrollably pleasurable hotness that streamed through her blood to every part of her being. It was so maddening, but at the same time, it was all so good. My word, Celestia, Rarity choked out, barely able to say anything, let alone make intellectual sense of the situation. She was quickly hushed when a large glob of Celestia's hair swirled in front of her and probed itself into her mouth, sliding in deep and down towards her throat. At the same time, Celestia began to move her hooves down lower, now sliding them under her and between her haunches, stroking in firm and rhythmic fashion as she began to suck on the horn once more in the same rhythm. This continued for several minutes, before Rarity finally found herself losing consciousness and blacking out from the overwhelming sensations boiling up and then exploding over and over inside of her. After giving a final hearty moan and finally passing out in her restraint, Celestia gently undid the knots and lowered her to the ground, letting her lay as a hot, sweaty mess on the floor. Celestia had to admit she was surprised the elegant, marshmallow-like one lasted so long as she did, but, still, it did not satisfy her hunger fully. 5 places down. 1 more to go. You mean, this has happened before? Luna asked, dumbfounded by what the captain of the Royal Guards was telling her. Yes, it has. A secret such as this, however, is only known to the most trustworthy subjects under Celestia, me being one of them. Though it hasn't happened in hundreds of years, Celestia made sure that a small number of ponies were informed through the generations so that they could help solve this crisis should it arise again. I see, Luna said, looking down and thinking briefly. After a moment, she raised her head towards the guard captain again, a worried twinkle in her eye. So, what happens next? What will Celestia do now that her, what was it? Through the years, a few of us who know came to call her Molestia as some sort of a side joke. So that's what we go with now. Yes. Well, what will Molestia do now that she is free? According to the previous incident, she will go out and seek those closest to her and try to get as much sexual pleasure out from them as possible. Once finished, she will then proceed to go out and molest nearly anyone and everyone she can, even going as far as the point of ordering some guards to aid her. That's terrible. How do we stop her? The only way we can get her back to normal is if we seal the part of her that's responsible for this back into the furthest depths of her mind. However, we need a unicorn pony adept in spells and deal with illusions, magical mechanics with magic, and also sealing spells in order to pull it off. Alright. I think maybe I should go down and try and find a spell book with the right spell. That won't be necessary, ma'am. We already have an agent with the abilities needed for the task. She was recruited by one of Candlelock's greatest magical minds several months ago, and she has already proven herself very skilled in many of the diverse fields of magic. Oh. Well, that's great. Where can we find this mare? Well, at this time of night, she's most likely asleep, so we'll have to wake her up. However, she has made it painfully clear not to, The guard captain paused momentarily, clearing his throat as if preparing to recite something he was taught, forcefully by the sound of it. Sometime in the past. She doesn't particularly enjoy others disturbing her great and powerful slumber. End part 4. So it seems as if the great and powerful Trixie will be making an appearance here. Can't wait to see what happens next.